Hi and welcome. My name is Simsina. One of the most requested videos on my channel is how to make your own mesh from scratch. So I have this idea for minimalistic, very simple furniture that I think would work perfectly for this tutorial. I really tried to make it as simple as possible, and it is beginner friendly, but if anything's unclear at any point, feel free to pause the video to leave your questions in the comments below. Now we're starting this tutorial off with requirements. To follow this tutorial, you'll need 3 different programs: Sims for Studio, Blender for 3D meshing, and 2D photo editing software. I'll provide all download links in the description below. We're starting our tutorial with Sims for Studio. So open Sims for Studio, and then right here under Object, tick Create 3D Mesh. In the catalog, I'm going to choose this very simple end table, but like the higher one. Now make sure the table is selected and then click Next. Right now I'm just saving the package file. Side note, all your mods that include CC as well should always be saved to your mods folder. Now after you saved it, you'll be brought here. And to edit mesh, select Meshes. Right here I'm going to need to export my mesh so that I can edit it. If you open this, you can see that there are several different options. Now I'm going to select the one with the lowest, LOD. LOD stands for level of detail. And what this really means is if you zoom into the object in the game, what you're viewing is the high LOD or level of detail. And then the more you zoom out in the game, the lower the LOD gets. Right, so I selected the medium LOD because it is the lowest LOD for this object. And once I have it selected, I'm going to click Export. What I'm exporting right now is my mesh as the Blender file. You can save that one wherever you want, really. Once you've exported it, open your Blender file. And this is what it looks like in Blender. First, right here in the corner, figure out which part of the mesh is what. Now, as you see, there are 3 main parts of this mesh. First one is this white plane. Second are shadows. And the third is our table that we want to edit. So select that one and then go into edit mode. Now, while in edit mode, I'm going to select all. To select all, you can simply press A on your keyboard. Now I'm going to move the whole table to the side by pulling it sideways with the red arrow. I moved it away just so that I can make my own mesh right here, but I didn't delete it just yet because I'm going to use it as a reference. And now I'm going to start modeling the table. Now this is going to be very simple, like I said, very plain table, just to get an idea of how all of this works. So, while still in edit mode, go to Create. As you can see, there are like several pre-made shapes here, and we're going to select Cube. And then this huge cube pops up. So I'm going to make this cube my tabletop by moving it around and scaling it until I get the exact tabletop that I want. So first I'm moving it to the center using the red arrow. Then I'm going to make it smaller by using the scaling option. You can activate scaling option by pressing S on your keyboard. Now when you press S on your keyboard, as you may have noticed, it kind of automatically scales the whole object, but you can also choose if you want to scale your object horizontally, vertically, or forwards and backwards. Now first I want to scale it horizontally until I get it to the size that I want. So I'm doing that by activating scaling first. So press S on your keyboard. And then to activate horizontal scaling, I'm pressing X on my keyboard. As you can see, now I'm scaling my object horizontally. You see how this red line highlights after I pressed X? Well, this is a nice way Blender shows you on which axis you're working on. And as we pressed X, we're working on X axis, so it highlights it for you. After that, I'm going to need to scale it vertically to make it like thinner. And to do that, same thing as before. First, activate scaling option by pressing S on your keyboard. And then to enable vertical scaling, press Y on your keyboard. As you see, it automatically starts scaling it vertically, or if you will, on the Y axis. The blue line is now highlighted, which indicates that I am working on Y axis, or well, vertically. In order to get it to position as accurately as possible, I'm going to change my view of the object. So first I press 1 on my keyboard, and the view changes. I'm zooming it in by pressing plus on my keyboard, and I'm pulling it up using the blue arrow until I got my tabletop to a height of the table that I left for reference. Like the reference is happening now. After I've done that, I don't really need this EA's table anymore, so I'm going to delete it. While Select by Face is selected, I'm hovering over the object and pressing L on my keyboard until I got everything selected. To delete, press X on your keyboard and choose Verticals. I'll go into the top view by selecting 7 on my keyboard, so that way I can see my tabletop a little bit better. I'm just moving it on the Z axis, or well, backwards and forwards, by using the green arrow. After that, I'll scale it on the Z axis as well. Again, activate scaling first by pressing S on your keyboard, and then press Z. I'm just playing around with it, resizing it until I'm happy with it. And my tabletop is done. But it's going to need some legs. Same thing as before. While in edit mode, I'm going to go to create and select cube again. I'm going to do with the legs exactly the same thing that I did with the tabletop. And I'm going to position my cube using different arrows and then scaling it by pressing S first and then pressing X on my keyboard to get it to scale on the X axis or horizontally. Then I'll scale it vertically by again first pressing S to activate scaling and then pressing Y to move it on the Y axis or vertically. I'm using the arrows to move it where I'd like my first leg table to be. Now this looks great from the front view, but not from literally any other view. And to fix that, I'll need to go to the side view to get it to a position as accurately as I can. Now to go to the side view, you're going to press number 3 on your keyboard. And this is the side view. As you can see, I'm going to need to scale it on the Z axis, so the green line. So as before, activate scaling by pressing S on your keyboard and then press Z to scale the object on the Z axis. Once I'm done, I'm just going to move it to get it where I want my leg table to be. Again, just playing around with it. The way that I'm going to do the rest of the table legs is that I'm going to simply duplicate the table leg that I had just made. Now, to duplicate, you can either select duplicate in the menu, or keyboard shortcut would be Shift plus D. Once you activated duplicate option, the object kind of just sticks to your mouse like this. To cancel this action, simply press Escape on your keyboard. Now you can just position it where you want your new table leg to be. So again, I'm just pulling it using the arrows and positioning it where I am happy with it. To get the remaining 2 legs, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Duplicating the existing legs and positioning them until I am happy. Feel free to go into different views to make sure everything is exactly where it should be. Hotkeys are number 1 for front view, number 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. Actually, all other numbers also activate different viewing positions. You can play around with different numbers to see what type of view you'd get by pressing each number. Once I'm done with all 4 legs and, well, with the whole table really, I can save my file. Once saved, I can go back to the Sims 4 Studio and import my new mesh. Make sure you always import your new mesh to all LODs, so to all levels of detail. And this is your table. The shape is fine, but it's kind of gray. Well, this is because when you make your new mesh, you're going to also need to create your new 2D image map of the object. So that way you can create your own textures, colors, swatches. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, have you ever seen, what's it called, like papercraft or something like that? Where you get this, like, paper model, something like this, and then you put it together to create a building or a house or whatever. Now, this is exactly what we need. We need this, so that we can put it around our table. UV mapping is something that can be done in Blender. So, to create a new UV map, you're going to first need to go to Edit mode, and then you can select the parts of your mesh that you would like to map out. Now for this tutorial, I'm just going to select the whole mesh. So while in Edit mode, press A on your keyboard to select all. Now, while my object is selected, I'm going to go to Shading/UVs, and then I'm going to select Mark Seams. Once you've selected Mark Seams, you can see that the line surrounding your object is now this dark orange, almost red color. This is how you know that your seams have been marked. Now, once your seams are marked, you're going to go to Unwrap and then simply select Unwrap again. Once that's done, your UV map should appear here. Now, you see how weird our table looks? Well, this is because our new UV map is overlaid over an existing texture and the two just don't match. Like, my new UV map doesn't really match with EA's texture. Now, we will fix that. But first, we need to sort out our UV map. It's like I'm making my own coloring book, and I need to have the shape done first before I start coloring it, right? And also, let's face it, our shape is a little bit of a mess. So, to make your job easier, it would be a very good idea if you just kind of rearrange this a little bit. I'm going to move these little boxes around until I get like somewhat comprehensible map of my table. Each of these little boxes represent different part of your mesh. So for example, these two big ones are quite obviously top and bottom of the tabletop, but we don't know which one is which. And there is actually a very simple way that you can figure out which part of the mesh is which. Just first make sure you click anywhere in the area where your UV map is. Literally like anywhere, just so that Blender recognizes that you're now working on your UV map and not on the object right here. Right, so just click anywhere, and then you're going to select one of these two large boxes to select simply hover over the part you want selected and press L on your keyboard. Now this part is selected. Now you're going to press G on your keyboard. As you can see, it kind of moves around with my mouse. Also over here, on the other side, we can see that the top of the table is moving as well. As you may have suspected, this is, my friends, how you know which part of the mesh you're working on. Now I'm working on this top part of the table because it is moving along with my UV mesh box. So now I know that this part of my table is a top part, and I can automatically know that this other part is the bottom part of my tabletop. Another thing that I can kind of automatically know are these small squares. Now each of these squares represent top and the bottom of my table legs. What the top and the bottom part of my table legs really look like, it's not really that important. So I can safely decide that all of them are going to look exactly the same. They're all going to be the exact same color, texture, whatever. They're pretty much irrelevant. Now I'm going to move all of them one by one to the same spot, and I'm going to stack them one on top of another. Again, the way that I select them is by hovering over them and then pressing L. And to move them, I'm going to press G on my keyboard. And then I'm just going to simply stack one on top of another. After that, I'm simply going to continue figuring out which part of the mesh is what. Selecting them by pressing L on your keyboard and then moving them around by clicking G on your keyboard. Now this long narrow one is the longer tabletop side. So now I automatically know that this one that looks exactly like it is the same thing except on the other side of the table. Now I've decided that these two are going to be exactly the same in texture and color, so I'm just going to place them one on top of another. Now I can presume that these two are also table sides, but like from the side, like the smaller side. So I'm going to rotate my table a little bit to get a better view to figure out which one is which. But in the end, I've decided that these ones are going to be exactly the same as well, so I'm just going to stack them one on top of another. I'm doing exactly the same thing with the table legs. Now I've decided that I'm going to divide my table legs into two different, say like shades. Like I want front part of the table legs to be lighter than the inner part of the table legs. Like I want the inner ones to be just a little bit darker. So I'm taking all the outer parts of the table legs and I'm placing them in one spot, and I'm putting all the inner parts into another spot. This might require some moving your table around just to figure out which part is which. You can also scale, rotate, you can do all of that in UV maps. Now I won't do this in this tutorial because I'm trying to keep it simple, but pretty much all commands are the same as in this window as they are in this window. So S would be for scaling, R for rotating, and so on. Once I'm done, I'm going to need to get this image out. Now, like I said, this is kind of like a coloring book, so once my lines are done, like the shape, and once I know what's what, I can start coloring it. To get this image, click UVs, and then select Export UV Layout. Right now I'm just saving the layout. Well, this is really just a PNG image, so just a regular image that I can then edit. Once I saved it, I'm going to open it in my photo editing software. And now this is where you can edit your texture. If you're using GIMP, this is what it'll look like. Like I have mentioned earlier, in this tutorial I'll be using a pre-existing texture. Now I got this texture from pixabay.com, and I'll post a link to the image of this texture down in the description as well. You can use the same texture that I'm using or any other texture that you like. First, I'm just going to drag my texture to my Files menu right here. Also, ignore this other image. I accidentally dragged it here and somehow left it there through the entire recording. So, my bad. I apologize. Now, once you inserted your texture here, you should have 2 layers. I have 3 because I accidentally left this one in, but you should have 2. First, let's create a comprehensive understanding of this map. This is my tabletop. This is my tabletop's bottom side. These are my tabletop sides, and these are my table legs. So I'm going to start with the tabletop's top. So make sure the texture is selected. Pretty much just click on it. And then I'm going to move my texture to the area where my tabletop is. So kind of like this. Right now, I want to cut out this part of the texture where my tabletop is. Right now, while still on the texture layer, I'm going to use the rectangle select tool from the menu up here. And then I'm going to drag the rectangle around the top of the table, so that I have it selected somehow like this. Once it is selected, I'm going to copy this selected area by pressing Ctrl+C on my keyboard. Once I've copied it, I'm going to paste it by pressing Ctrl+V on my keyboard. Now, as you can see, another layer pops up. This is the layer that I had just pasted, and right now it's kind of just floating because I didn't yet give it the command that I want it to be a new layer. So all I did is that I had just pasted it. To make it a new regular layer, right click on the floating section and this menu pops up. Now I'm going to select to a new layer. And now this pasted part becomes its own layer. Right here, next to your layers, you have this eye icon. All this does is that it hides the layer from the view. So if I hide our main texture by clicking on the eye icon, as you can see, it hides it. And now I can see only my map and the part of the texture that I had just pasted because only these 2 eye icons are active. I'm pretty satisfied with how this looks. So I'm going to repeat the exact same thing for all other parts of my map. I'm going to take my original texture, drag it to where it fits nicely. You can play around with it, scaling it if you want. It's really up to your creativity and ideas, in my opinion. And then, by using the rectangle select, I'm going to select out the parts of the texture following the map lines again. Then I'm going to copy them by pressing Ctrl+C and pasting them by pressing Ctrl+V. Then right-click on the floating section that I had just pasted and select to a new layer. I had also made this side part a little bit darker using adjust color levels. Nothing too much, just a little bit darker to hopefully make the table look a little bit better. I'm doing the exact same thing for the table legs. The only thing that I did differently for the table legs is that I had rotated my texture. I did this again only due to a creative choice. This is just how I imagined that table, that like the wood pattern would be flipped on the table legs. So while the texture is selected, choose rectangle select table legs, copy and paste it, and then right-click on the floating section and paste it to a new layer. Again, doing the exact same thing for my shorter side piece of the tabletop. After that, the only two things that I have left are underneath the tabletop and top and the bottom of my table legs. Now, to be honest with you, these are pretty much not so important to me, so I'm just going to make them a solid color that wouldn't really like scream out in the game. So I just went with almost black, well, like very, very dark gray. And now if I remove my map, you can see I pretty much have a texture done. Now I'm just going to add some finishing touches. Like I want to make the inner parts of the table legs a little bit darker, as well as this side piece. So I'm just making it a bit darker. And that's it. Now I'm going to save it by clicking File and then Export. Here you can just, choose a file name, choose a folder you want to save it to, and then simply hit Export, and then Export again. After that, you can go to the Sims 4 Studio, and right here under Textures, select Texture, and click Import. Import your image, and there you have it. The table is finally done. Now, of course, if you guys want more swatches, you can always go back to GIMP or, well, your photo editing software and play around with different colors. No rules to this, just your own touches and what you like and what you prefer. In the Sims 4 Studio, you can add your swatches by simply clicking Add Swatch, and then you can import your recolors and retextures under Texture by simply importing them. Also, don't forget to hit Save. Now I sound like a broken record, but all your CC and mods should always be saved to your mods folder. And that is it. Here's our table in Brittleton Bay. Now, like I had said in the beginning, next week's video will be about how to make your Maxis Match textures. You know, those beautiful textures that fit perfectly in the game. I had already made a few Maxis Match textures. The ones that I did are the ones from the Spa Day, just because I really like Spa Day textures. I did wood textures, tile, fabric, and a couple of others. I also did all the swatches for them, of course. These are perfectly tileable, if that's how you say it. They're like seamless, meaning you can put one next to another, and on top and underneath, and they connect perfectly like a puzzle. And I'll put these up for download. When I manage to put them up for download, I'll probably make a community post to inform you about it. I hope this video helped some of you guys. If it did, and if you find my content useful and informative in general, please like this video, and you can always support me by subscribing to my channel. It costs you nothing, and to me it really means a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.